and then we can post it on our YouTube channel. So we're now recording. I'd like to remind everybody to put themselves on mute. So, okay, it looks like everybody's on mute. Just a few business items that we need to go over to. We have a nominating committee of Lori Turner, Laura Hillman, and Shelby Thomas. And they'll be finding candidates for president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and one board member position for our elections in April. So if you're interested in running, or you know anybody who's interested in running, contact one of those three people. Laura assures me that she's not going to nominate herself for president again, so we need somebody to be president. So also we need a Como Gives coordinator. Jan has done a wonderful job the last 2 years with Como Gives, but she's ready to pass the torch. So if you're interested in being the Como Gives coordinator, let me know, and we'll get you together with Jan, and she can provide you with the information. So without any, we're going to, can't talk today. We're gonna start our program now. We have Paige Witek from the Missouri River Bird Observatory. We'd like to welcome back Paige, Education Coordinator for the Missouri River Bird Observatory. Paige is a native of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and has a degree in zoology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She joined the MRBO staff full-time in 2018. Her duties include coordinating MRBO's Young Explorers Camp and the Missouri Young Birders Club. She's also creator of MRBO's Wacky Fact Wednesday video post. This evening, Paige is going to talk to us about the amazing engineering of bird nests. So take it away, Paige.
All right, thank you, Jim. And thank you, Nancy, for inviting me to come tonight. I'm excited to talk to you all about bird nests. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout. I'll probably keep going throughout the presentation, but if there are moments for me to check the chat, I might answer some questions as they come up too, but hopefully we'll have time at the end too. So I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint to show because we got to show pictures of these nests, right? So 1 second, I'm just doing hold up. It's fine. It's all good. We're not having issues. I just adjust something. Okay. All right, here we go. So I'm sure I don't have to convince any of you how awesome birds are, but we're going to talk about specifically their nests, what they are and how cool they are. And when you really get to observe a nest up close, or if you've ever tried to build a nest, you know that they're very difficult and they're very intricate. I'll often do nest building activities with kids, and the main thing that they get is building bird nests is hard, and they often get frustrated because it's really hard to interweave sticks into a circle, but birds find some way to do it. But before I really get into that, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more. So some of this is going to be a repeat of what Jim said. So this is me typically when I'm giving a program in person. I'm very animated. I like this picture because it like captures me in like a very goofy moment. But I'm going to try to keep my hands to myself as we talk through Zoom, because it does tend to like freak out the video and kind of lag the internet a little bit. So I'm going to try to stay more still. But I grew up, like Jim said, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I went to the University of Wisconsin for my undergrad studying zoology and environmental studies. While I was in school and after, I worked at various wildlife organizations and sanctuaries. And it was through school in college that I really discovered my love of birds. Before that, I loved being outside. I loved nature. But you wouldn't like, you know, I'm sure most of you know, you kind of have to be introduced to the bird world. And that didn't really happen until I was in school. But since then, I've just become more and more, I guess you could say, obsessed or passionate, whatever word you want to use, about birds as I learned more about them. So I moved to Missouri in 2017, started out as the seasonal educator for the Missouri River Bird Observatory, because I loved environmental education, and the fact that I would get to do it specifically about birds just really appealed to me. And then in 2018, that's when I became full-time with the Bird Observatory. And I think birds are awesome, which I'm sure was no surprise to you, and I'm sure many of you would agree. If you're unfamiliar with MRBO, I think I gave a program not too long ago to this group. I feel like we talked about, was it migration? I forget. But these are the things that we work towards as the Missouri River Bird Observatory, and you can learn more a lot about our work on our website, which is just mrbo.org. All right, so bird nests. So we're going to talk about these amazing engineers that we have living in our backyard. This is a bird nest that you wouldn't find in Missouri, but I think it's just kind of a cool example of a bird nest. So this is made by a bird called a bowerbird, and they're known for creating these elaborate and fantastical nesting sites that not only are for raising the young, but also attracting potential mates. So not only is that structure impressive when you're looking at that arch structure, which if you ask any architect is kind of difficult to build that arch, but typically the bower is decorated with other beautiful accessories like flowers, beetle shells, berries, anything to catch the female's eye. And the satin bowerbird favors blue things, blue trinkets. So the older a bird is, the more blue objects that he'll decorate his bower with. So as you can see, this bird found a lot of blue, unfortunately, plastic items to kind of surround his nest, but there is a lot there that he found, so this is probably an older bowerbird's nest. So that's just one example of some artistry that goes on with it. So what I'm going to cover tonight, why make nests? We'll do some definitions of that. I'm going to quickly go over on the main types of nests and examples of them fairly quickly so we have some time to cover other fun nest types, topics, like the identification of nests. I'm going to go over very quickly. And some common nest examples that you might find in your backyard, as well as some neat nest and nest facts. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. So first off, why make a nest? So first though, before I talk about that, I want to talk about like what a nest is, because I think sometimes the way we teach nests, particularly kids, can be kind of confusing. So it is a spot where a bird lays and incubates its eggs and raises its young. So sometimes I think we're taught to think like nests are like the bird's home, but the primary purpose of a nest is to raise the young and not necessarily for them to like live in. But we know if you have bluebird boxes or other bird boxes, birds will use like a nest type structure to roost in as well, so spend the night. Another term that I want to cover is brood. So these are the young birds that are hatched at one time. You might also think of them as a hatch. So if the bluebird lays 4 eggs, they hatch. She incubates them, they hatch, they grow into nestlings, they leave the nest, they fledge. That is one brood, and the bluebird may lay another set of eggs in the same year, and that is another brood. So just to keep those in mind as we're talking tonight. So the nest provides, so why make a nest? The nest provides warmth, shelter from the elements, safety, cushioning, camouflage, all these different things. These are what the birds are looking for from the nest. But because birds live in all sorts of environments, there's a huge variety in their nests. So based on who you ask, there are different types of nests, and they can vary a lot. So there might be more categories than the ones shared here. Some lists will have less categories than this, or you could have subcategories added to these. But these are the main types that I'm going to talk about. So we've got cup nests, cavity nests, and I think there's an argument to say that most of the rest of these types could fit into those top 2 categories if we kind of stretch what we think of as a cup and a cavity. But nonetheless, We also have what we call platform nests, scrape nests, burrow nests, pendant or suspended nests, adherent nests, and mound nests, which I don't have bolded because we don't have an example of a bird that lives in Missouri that makes a mound nest, or at least that breeds in Missouri that makes a mound nest. So I'm not going to cover that one in as much detail, but it's kind of what you would think of. It's like a mound on the ground. So a cup nest. So I apologize. I'm going to try to go through these relatively quickly. So these are open, bowl-shaped. They're more exposed to the elements, which means that the nesting time is usually quick. They lay the eggs, they raise the young, they get out of there. But also the nest, because they're more exposed to the elements, the nesting success can be relatively low. It's usually low, especially compared to cavity nests, which I'll talk about in a second. Some birds that build cup nests, so northern cardinal, blue jay, American robin, ruby-throated hummingbird, dickcissel. A lot of the grassland birds that breed in the grasslands will make kind of a cup or dome nest. I think microphone is on. If you could please turn that off, that would be super helpful. If we're on mute, just because it's a little distracting as I'm trying to go through and someone's making a little bit of sound. But these are the type of birds that build cup nests. So cavity nest, kind of the opposite. So basically a hole in tree, or if you live out west, a hole in a cactus. And holes can be excavated by animals or naturally occur in the tree. These nests are a little bit better protected from the elements. So the nesting time is usually longer because they can be a little bit longer because they're a little bit more protected from different things. The nest success is usually higher. So because they are more protected from the elements and from predators. So comparatively, I'm going to throw out some numbers. So like a cup nest in the grassland, probably like 30% success rate. Cavity nest, maybe like 80% success rate. So much, much higher. But of course, that's, on average. So birds that build or use cavity nests, you're probably familiar with these birds because they're also ones that will use nest boxes. So woodpeckers, considered primary cavity nesters. So they're the ones that can make the cavities because they have those special adaptations to be able to do so. But eastern bluebirds, chickadees, tufted titmice, house wrens, prothonotary warblers, they all use cavities as well. Platform nests. So these are relatively simple nests. They're large, they're conspicuous, typically a large pile of sticks towards the top of trees or other tall structures. They're usually made by predatory birds, which is what kind of allows them to be more large and conspicuous. They're pretty much exclusively sticks for the most part, especially when we're talking about eagles or ospreys, who are some birds that may build and use platform nests. Great horned owls are another example, great blue herons, egrets. And then I put the peregrine falcon in there as a sort of, because they're high up and they're usually on a platform, but there's usually not sticks on there or any really sort of structure. They're just kind of there on the ledge. So sort of. Scrape nest. So this is the most minimalistic type of nest. So it's basically just a shallow depression on the ground without much nesting material, though it may have a light lining of down, grass, pebbles, weeds, or other debris. Sometimes they'll kind of just line it with pebbles. And that minimalistic architecture is the nest's primary defense. So you can't, it's best when there's nothing really there to find. But the eggs and the young are usually very well camouflaged. So the picture here is of a killdeer nest. And I don't know, it's been a couple times where someone's like, oh my gosh, there's a killdeer nest. It's right there. It's 3 feet in front of you. And I'm still like, wait, where is it? It can be hard to see when there's no movement. So they're well camouflaged in that way. But birds that build scrape nests are killdeer, wild turkey, American avocet, and many other shorebirds build this type of nest. So it is Wednesday. And so I got a request to possibly show some Wacky Fact Wednesday videos, which Jim mentioned in my intro. So these are kind of fun bird videos that I do for our Facebook page for social media. I one day will probably put them on YouTube as well. But they're just kind of these short 1-minute clips about different bird facts. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can check those out on our Facebook page. They're still up there if you go to the Wacky Fact Wednesday playlist. And so I'm going to share this one with you that I did on killdeer. So hopefully this plays. Let me just make sure we're good to go with sound. Looks like it. Have you ever seen a bird do this before? Did the bird look like this? That bird is called a killdeer because of the shrill, wailing killdeer call that they give so often. What I was demonstrating in my wonderful dance was their broken wing act. The parent killdeer acts as though it has a broken wing to lead predators away from its nest. Okay, so the killdeer is trying to appear vulnerable, so the predator follows them instead of going to their nest. Nice. Exactly. But this doesn't keep cows and horses from stepping on the eggs. To guard against large hoofed animals, the killdeer uses quite a different display. They fluff themselves up, put their tail over their head, and then run at the beast to try to get it to change its path. Keep an eye out for these displays because a killdeer nest might just be nearby. Now we know. Stay birdie and happy Wednesday. So as you can see, I get a little goofy when I'm left in the office by myself. But those are just a little fun, and I'll have some more examples of that as we go along because I can't help it. Okay, so another type of nest is, have you ever again? Okay, a burrow nest. So this is a lot less common here in Missouri, but we do have some examples of birds. So basically a hole in the ground or along a stream bank. So birds that build burrow nests are belted kingfisher, burrowing owls sort of come into Missouri every once in a while. But belted kingfisher being the main example of this, kind of building these long tunnels in the sides of like the rivers and streams. And they can be something like 8 feet long, like deep into the bank. And they also have this unique mechanism to be able to like not let in water. So if water were to get in, it wouldn't actually get to the nest chamber, like based on the way they kind of make their tunnel. My understanding is it's kind of like in that P shape, like kind of like a P trap, which I just think is really cool. There's also pendant or suspended nests. So you may recognize that picture of the Baltimore Oriole nest. So these are elaborately woven sacks that dangle from branches. Some are not suspended very far from branches, while others may hang several feet below their attachment point. So common pendant builders are Baltimore Orioles, Orchard Orioles, and many vireos build what I would call like a suspended nest. Adherent nest. These are going to be like kind of remind you a lot of cup nests. So I'd say this is almost a subcategory of cup nest. So it basically is a cup nest that's stuck to something. And the stickiness can be from mud, saliva, tree sap, all kinds of different things. More typically mud than anything else, but saliva is also used. So birds that build these adherent nests are swallows, chimney swift, eastern phoebe, sort of sometimes, depending on what structure they make their nests. And as you can see here, the barn swallow, those are common ones that you'll see like around houses and in barns, making that adherent nest. So thank you. I tried to go through that as fast as I could, but also giving you some good information about the different types of nests as we move forward. But I also wanted to kind of hopefully bring in some new information because I know there's probably some interest in trying to identify the nests that you see. Is it possible? In the winter, I would say it's very difficult because I would say it's very difficult to know what nests you're really looking at unless you see the adults using it. Most species have a lot of variation in their nests and will use a lot of different types of materials. But that shape, overall shape and structure tends to have some similarities. But typically when I'm strolling through the woods, a clump of materials, it may look like this, just kind of a clump of materials that are seemingly more constructed that could appear by chance from the wind or rain. But I'm not sure who made this nest. I have some guesses, but that's probably as close as I will get, and that's maybe fine. But the winter is a great time to kind of go a little bit closer and inspect a little bit more because the birds aren't necessarily using them to breed. which is the time that we want to kind of stay back and let them do their thing. But I'll also see a lot, I think this is good to point out, these nests. So high in trees, kind of clumps of sticks and leaves. So these are squirrel nests, right? One type of the nest that tree squirrels make. So ground squirrels nest in the ground, but tree squirrels make these types of nests, and they'll also nest in cavities. And these types of nests are usually up at least 20 feet. They're noticeably more sizable than bird nests. The only size that could somewhat compare is maybe like a hawk nest, but that's going to be, it's not going to look as much just like a clump up there. It's going to have a little bit more platformy. And the main giveaway, I would say, is if there are leaves in the nest. This is very typical of squirrels, but not very typical of birds to use leaves. So that's kind of a good way to tell. So with this, we don't have a whole lot to go of, but if we get a closer look, maybe we'll be able to narrow it down a little bit more, see how it's constructed. I'd say this kind of looks like a pendant nest. And there are common patterns to a certain species nests, and the basic structure is typically the same. So that I would say it's possible, but very difficult. So you really want to have some great resources available to you. And I'd say a big one that's free is nestwatch.org. All kinds of information about how to identify nests, some tips for doing so. If you want to monitor some nests around your house and submit them as a citizen science project, that's basically what Nest Watch is about through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. But there's just a lot of great resources on that website. Also, you can have some field guides. So there's one by Peterson. So I have it in my picture here too. Eastern birds nests. It's got some okay pictures in it, but it's got some good descriptions of breeding range, habitat, a description of the nest, what the eggs typically look like, and some other notes. And then there's a little drawing of the birds in the corner. So this is one that we use. That's pretty good. But I'd say another more detailed one is that one pictured here on the slide, the nests, eggs, and nestlings of North American birds. As you can see, it's a little bit thicker. It's covering a little bit more birds. But this is one that our field technicians will use to help them identify nests. And again, it just kind of gives descriptions of where that bird might nest, the type of habitat, the type of nest it makes with some measurements, what season you'll find the nest, which is important, what the eggs look like, incubation period, nestling period, different things like that. There are some pictures of the different eggs as well, if you're interested in that, as well as what the nestlings kind of look like. So that's a really good resource as well. Now, I'm going to do a little PSA about when we're looking for nests, because it's such a vulnerable time for birds when they are breeding. So we want to be really careful to avoid accidental harm to a nest, parental desertion of a nest, or attracting predators to a nest. So you want to exercise some caution and responsibility when monitoring nests to ensure the safety of birds, their nests, and the nest contents. So it should never jeopardize the well-being of the birds, which I think we can all agree upon. I'll also say, and I'll talk about some, in this code, there on nestwatch.org, there's also a great code of conduct. If you're looking like, well, can I do this or should I do that? There's more details listed on that website. I'll also say that under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of the United States, it is illegal to possess, import, export, transport, sell, purchase, barter, or offer for sale any migratory bird or the parts, nests, or eggs of such a bird except under the authority of a valid permit. Additionally, many species are protected by other state and local laws. Therefore, in most instances, it's illegal for you to touch or otherwise physically disturb an active nest or its contents. Now, that's a little bit different in the winter, but we have a permit to have some nests. So if you want to look at some nests up close, we have one for education purposes. Just come on by and we can look at some nests. So there's, like I said, there's some great guidelines on nestwatch.org about what you can do if you're interested in monitoring bird nests. All right, so when we're looking at a nest, when we find one, this is what we're going to consider. So location and timing are key. Migratory birds have separate ranges for their breeding and wintering activities, whereas resident birds live in the same region all year round, right? So nests found early in the spring tend to belong to non-migratory residents, while migrants return and breed later in the spring and summer. And that's just like a general rule. Obviously, there are species that kind of exceptions to that, such as the American goldfinch, and they nest during the late summer. But for example, you can expect to find a chickadee nest much earlier in the spring than a warbler nest. So that timing can be important. Location of the nest. Is it on the ground? Is it in a tree or shrub? Is it on a building? What's the composition and shape of the nest? Look at the size, shape, color of the eggs if you can find them. How many eggs are there? Oh, sorry. So those are all things. I'm going to try to go back to that slide. There we go. So those are all things that you want to look for as you're trying to inspect the nest. And then look at, okay, what might this possibly be? How big is the nest? Different things like that. What one of the types that I went over is that nest. So I'm going to go over some nest examples that you might find in your backyard or when you're out strolling around. So first, well, this one I want to cover because I think it's a really cool nest, but I have actually never found one. So they're really hard to find, but I wanted to still kind of cover some details about it because I get asked a lot about hummingbird nests because they're really, really tiny. So their nest is solitary, meaning it kind of stands alone on its own. It's not in a group type of nests. They'll choose a variety of different tree species, and it'll range from 6 to 50 feet off the ground, with average about 10 to 20 feet above the ground. So it's usually attached to a small twig or branch that slants downward from the tree. And it's usually sheltered above by leafy branches. So you can imagine that makes it quite difficult to find. If it's 10 feet off the ground on a small twig, it's a small nest, and then it's covered by leafy branches. They're made of plant down, fibers, bud scales attached to limb with spider silk, which is a very unique thing to hummingbird nests, I think. Camouflaged to that tree branch. The viewed from the ground is said to look like a mossy knot on a limb. So their outside diameter is 1 to 1.75 inches, and the height is 1 to 2 inches. So very, very small, like, only an inch or so. And the depth is about 2 centimeters, so not very deep either. A very similar looking nest that is much more commonly found is the blue-gray gnatcatcher, which is why I'm going to mention it here. They are also attached to a small tree limb or fork in a tree. They range from 40 to 70 feet off the ground with an average that's less than 25 feet. They're cup-shaped. They're built of plant down, fiber, spider silk. They have that lichen on the outside and all kinds of things. But they're I want to say much bigger, but they're probably at least twice the size of a hummingbird nest. So that's partly why they're found more often, is because they're slightly bigger. So their outside diameter is 2 to 2.5 inches. Their height is going to be 2 1/4 inch or 2.5 inches. The outside diameter, that 1 1/4 inch. And the depth is 3.2 to 3.3 centimeters. So about they are typically much deeper than a hummingbird nest. So I'd say the blue-gray gnatcatcher nest looks a lot like a hummingbird nest, but it's slightly larger and it's much deeper. And I have found them before outside just by watching blue-gray gnatcatchers walk around or fly around. And what's an unusual characteristic of this bird is it'll tear up completely or partly completed nests to build another one nearby. Like almost just like, oh, this spot's better. So it just like takes its materials from one and moves it to this other spot, which I think is really interesting and not super common. Usually if a bird wanted to do that, it would just kind of leave that old nest and go build a new one where it wanted to. Okay, another one that you may have found around your house or your barn or your garage, is the eastern phoebe. So they like shelf-like projections. They're usually constructed of weeds, grasses, fibers, mud, covered with mosses, and lined with finer grasses and hair. I'd say that moss is a real key feature of a phoebe nest, other than its location. I don't find the moss is typically in those barn swallow nests. So I feel, which is a similar looking nest. So I think that can be a really big key. They're semicircular when attached to a wall, and they're circular when they're flat on a beam or a rafter. Their outside diameter is 4.5 inches, height 4 inches, inside diameter 2.5. Oh, I thought I had the depth on there. Sorry, everybody. But they're not very deep. The phoebe is really like, I'd say, a ledge. So if you've got like an edge to your house, and then you've got a roof, they like to build underneath that roof on that ledge, sort of high up, so that their young are kind of covered just by that roof of your house or whatever structure. And that kind of helps protect them from the elements. So they'll kind of build the nest up just as high as they need to kind of be that perfect height between the ledge and the roof, covering them, which I just think is really interesting. The northern cardinal is also one that you can find in your backyard. So they really like dense shrubbery. So small trees, coniferous trees, thickets, vines, briar tangle, but I'll find them, or most often, like thick bushes. They're usually 3 to 20 feet above the ground, generally below 10 feet. And they're built of twigs, vines, some leaves, some bark strips, grasses, weed stalks, rootless, and lined with fine grasses and hair on the inside. And I was taking my notes from this book, and there were no notes on the typical size of a cardinal nest, but I would say maybe 5-inch diameter, not super large, but not definitely bigger than a hummingbird or blue-gray gnatcatcher, but just big enough as they need to, kind of twigs and grasses is what I would say. So the last one I'm going to share with you is another Wacky Fact Wednesday about a Carolina wren and their nesting behavior, which is one of my favorites. So hopefully this plays okay. I know my internet's a little bit weird tonight.
You're already looking for nesting spots? I gotta get my stuff together. You really on top of it for having such a rough go this winter. Hey everybody, it's Wacky Fact Wednesday, and this week we're going to talk about one of my favorite nesters, the Carolina wren. Male and female Carolina wrens build their nest together, with one member going out to gather materials and one staying at the nest site. The bulky nest is cup-shaped, usually domed, with a side entrance and often a woven extension like a porch or entrance ramp. It's loosely constructed of a great variety of materials, pretty much anything you can think of. But what I find truly wacky is their choice of location. Carolina wrens are open cavity nesters, and they may nest in trees, branches, overhangs, stumps, but near homes, they're versatile nesters, making use of discarded flower pots, mailboxes, propane tank covers, and a variety of other items. Their nests have even been found in old coat pockets and boots. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to have a Carolina wren nesting in the most unlikely spot near your home. Stay birdie and happy Wednesday.
So when I get someone that comes up and they're like, so I have this bird and it built a nest, I'm like, ooh, I bet that's a Carolina wren. They like to choose some unusual spots. And what's been really enjoyable this winter is I've seen this Carolina wren will come up on our porch here at the office and just kind of like look around. Like you can tell it's like looking for little spots to on the porch to nest in.
You're already looking for nesting
again.
You're already looking.
So now I'm just going to talk about some neat nest and neat nest facts, because some of these nests would just be hard to talk about nests and not mention them because they're some of the coolest in the world. So first I want to talk about this study that studied hummingbird nests and their proximity to hawk nests. So the hawk nests provide protection for those little birds in a symbiotic relationship called commensalism. So this happens because the hummingbirds are too small to be targets for the hawks, but other birds that may try to eat hummingbirds or their eggs in this case of this study, it was the Mexican jay, can be targets for the hawks. So the jays have to look out for the hawks and don't go after the hummingbird nests close to where the hawk hangs out. So this graphic is from a study by Greeny et al. In 2015 that studies Cooper's hawks, black-chinned hummingbirds, and Mexican jays down in Mexico. And all of those green dots represent successful hummingbird nests close to the central tree where the hawk nest is. And the red dots are depredated hummingbird nests. So ones that were depredated by the jays, which I feel like this graphic is kind of confusing because it kind of shows the red by the jay, but that means a jay got to that nest. So the study concluded that active hawk nests really increased the hummingbird nest success by changing the behavior of the nest predators, which in this study were jays, which I think is really cool and fascinating. So I want to share with some examples of some really intense nests. So you may have even heard of these before, but let's just go and nerd about them right now too. So there's a bird called the sociable weaver, which I feel like in its name is kind of descriptive of its nest. And they're found in the Kalahari Desert region in South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. And they're one of the best known of the unusual nest builders because of their huge, elaborate group nesting sites they create. In fact, they hold the record for the largest tree nests in the world. So instead of birds building individual nests, they build one gigantic one for the entire colony. Over 100 of these sociable weavers can occupy a single nest at a given time. And some nests have even remained occupied for over 100 years, which I think is really interesting. And you can compare the sociable weaver's nest to that of a beehive, as there are tiny entrances to each cell or nesting space for individual birds. These nesting chambers are usually 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and there can be as many as 5 to 100 nesting chambers in a single sociable weaver nests. Yeah, it's just this huge nests, and they can be so heavy that they can weigh several tons, and some have even caused the trees that they were in to fall down, which kind of seems counterproductive to me. But I just think that's a really cool, that's a huge nest. Another interesting one is the bio weaver. So these are found across the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. And they're sometimes touted as like the king of nest building birds. I don't know. They build cool nests, but I don't know about the king. So they use this impressive nest building skill to not only create a home, but attract a mate. So during mating seasons, females go around and inspect each male's nest, deciding which one they find most pleasing. And studies have shown that nest location, rather than nest construction, has been more of an influence factor on female choosing. But I'm sure the sturdiness of the nest also helps. So the nests are sock-shaped with that central nesting chamber and a vertical tube that leads to another entrance within the chamber. And they're kind of constructed of these rough grasses, and it can take as many as 500 trips back and forth for the male to collect all of the materials necessary for building the nest. So he goes back and forth and finds all those materials and then works really hard at weaving it all together. Yeah, I just think and there's some more information out there about these birds. I saw a PBS video on it, so if you want to hear more, you can find that too. To end with, this isn't the last fact, but we're getting close to the end. I wanted to end with another cool nest that's made by a bird that we can find here in Missouri, which is the pied-billed grebe, because they make floating nests. They make them out in the water, which I'm sure is not too surprising to you, as if you're familiar with grebes, you know that they like to be in the water. That's where they feel most comfortable. So they create this open bowl nest on kind of a platform of floating vegetation. So the crude circular platform may be placed atop a lily leaf or built up from buoyant materials, such as the stems of bulrushes or water lilies. Both sexes will build the nest, and they can construct a platform that will support an egg in as little as a day. And it usually starts 3 to 5 days before egg laying that they start building the nest. And it continues during and after egg laying because the nest kind of sinks a little bit as the time goes on. So they collect these different materials, the flexible materials, fresh or partly decomposed plants from beneath the water, clip off stiffer material near the surface. So it's about 4 to 5 inches in diameter, about 1 inch deep, and they lay about 2 to 10 eggs. So the nests kind of gradually sink, so they keep adding on to it. And when the first egg is laid, it can be laid in almost a puddle of water. But then what they'll do is they'll add on more plant material on the side of the rim of the nest as they kind of turn the egg. So they'll keep adding materials to it, and they'll actually grab the plant material and tuck it underneath the eggs. And that way they raise the eggs out of the water until they're high and dry after a couple of days. But I think one of the cool things about using these materials is that the dead and decaying plant material actually gives off heat, and that helps some of the incubation of the eggs. Not completely, but it helps a little bit. And I think that's really interesting. So they're kind of throwing in this dead and decaying material, which is kind of keeping the eggs out of the water, but also providing heat, which I think is really interesting. So that's the pie-billed grebe nest. And also their young are super cute. I don't know if you've ever had the chance to see them, but I love it. So last, I'm going to end with another Wacky Fact Wednesday video. This one was a little bit more fun because I made it with my summer education intern, Evelyn.
Hey, Evelyn, guess what?
What?
It's Wacky Fact Wednesday.
Wacky Fact Wednesday? Thank goodness.
Have you heard of a lark sparrow?
Yeah. You mean this bird? The sparrows that sometimes reuse the old nests of northern mockingbirds and brown thrashers?
Yeah, and I heard from Eric that several of the nest use records suggest nest sharing because eggs or nestlings of the two species were observed in a single nest.
Whoa! Awesome!
Yeah, apparently it doesn't happen very often, but it's still pretty cute.
Stay birdie and happy Wednesday!
So you can see we're a little bit goofy. That's all I have for you. That's all I prepared for you. So that was kind of my summary of bird nests. The Bird Observatory also has some other webinars about bird nests if you're interested in those. It's more of a deep dive into those 8 different types of nests. So I can share those links if people are interested. But for now, I'd love to answer any questions that anybody has. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see your faces if you prefer to unmute.
I guess if you have a question, type it in the chat or unmute yourself or raise your hand if you're showing your video, and I'll call on you. So, does anybody have any questions for Paige?
Well, while you're thinking of them, I'll grab those nesting webinars from our YouTube page. So if you're interested, you can watch those. So I put, if you want a little bit more of a deep dive in those 8 different types of nests.
Okay, so
Well, and if anybody thinks of a question later, feel free to email me. Mine's name, it's just paige.witek@mrbo.org. So it's just my name. So I can put that in the chat as well.
Paige,
Oh, thanks, Winifred.
this is Louise. I have a question about heron nests. We have a nice rookery here in Columbia that I check every year, and a bunch of the nests have disappeared. In fact,
Wow, this is a quiet group. I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep. Okay, I see some laughs. Okay. Good.
Paige, can you hear Louise?
Paige, can you hear me?
I don't know. Louise, you may have to type your question.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Paige?
Well, if nobody has any questions, that's totally fine. Thank you all for listening tonight. I hope you learned at least one new
Wait,
thing.
Paige.
Oh, is Nancy talking? Oh, I can't hear Nancy. Oh, I'm sorry. I put mine on mute when I went into YouTube so that you guys didn't have to hear my YouTube playing.
Okay. Yeah, Louise had a question and
Louise has- yeah.
we were trying to get your attention, so.
I'm
Okay,
so
Louise.
sorry.
That's okay. My question has to do with heron nests. We have a rookery here in Columbia that I check every year. And for years, we had 8 really large heron nests. And now we're down to 1. And I was curious, I could understand why maybe the herons didn't come back because of activity that's happened now near their nests, but why would the whole nest disappear? I mean, because it seems like they add to their nests every year.
Right. That is a great question, Louise, that I'm not sure the answer to. It's possible it just got knocked down out of the nest, because I know like sometimes those nests are kind of like, over time, they just kind of got looser and kind of fell out. But that seems unlikely too, almost. Maybe like a high windstorm kind of knocked those things out. And so if the herons weren't coming back and they weren't rebuilding and keeping them maintained, that they just fell out. That's my only thought. But
Yeah,
I'd have to look into it more. Yeah, is that what you thought too?
Yeah, I hope that nobody tried to knock them down, but I don't think you could.
So Louise, do you think that's the loss of that rookery is because of the cross-country track?
Well, I suspect that may be true. But I don't know. That's kind of because, the nests were there year after year after year. And then when the cross-country track came in, they were gone except for 1.
Yeah, that seems like a little bit more like
Suspicious.
suspicious, yeah. Yep, that increased activity kind of, they were just like, not feeling that.
Yeah, well, on the positive note though, there's an upper rookery by the track and then there's a lower rookery, and there are more nests now down in the lower rookery. So they may have moved. And I kind of, Edge had told me that's probably what will happen. But I don't understand why the nest is gone, because they were huge nests. I can
Right,
understand
yeah.
the birds going, but why are the nests gone?
Yeah, maybe it's a sign that they take more maintenance than we realize, even for those large nests. Maybe you have to kind of keep building it, otherwise it'll just fall out of the tree.
I wonder if they would take the material from the nest and build a nest downstream. Would they reuse?
That is entirely possible as well. I don't know whether or not, I don't have a straightforward answer whether or not great blue herons will do that. Kind of like we talked about, the blue-gray gnatcatcher does that. But I would think that if they're looking for those similar materials, why not just take them from, as you say, that upper rookery to bring them down to the other one? So
Yeah.
seems like a smart move to me.
Yeah, it does. I'll have to watch and see if I see any of them.
Somebody asked if you would share where the rookery is, Louise?
Gans Creek Recreation Area.
Which is the
You
new
almost
city
need
park.
somebody to show you the first time. I'll probably, I usually go out on March 15th, and maybe I'll send something out to the group, and somebody would like to go see it,
Okay.
because they're usually coming back by then.
That'll be cool. Maybe I'll come too.
Yeah, that'd be great, and the more people that can count nests and see where things are,
I'm sure John Besser and Eric Wood would love for you to do a field trip when you go out. 'Cause they're
Yeah.
always looking for field trips.
Yeah, I
Especially
know.
now that
Well,
we're having them again, so
right,
you might
right.
want
Well,
to.
I was gonna get a hold of probably Eric and John and see if I'd be glad to do a field trip. I thought I'd wait till a little closer, so we had a good day.
Paige, when can we expect bluebirds to come back?
I'm sure there's more expertise on that in this room than there is for me, but I want to say like, I mean, they're here right now. So they stay here through the winter. But in terms of like coming back and like nesting and stuff, I think they usually pick up their nesting kind of around March, April. They'll start looking for stuff. So it's good to kind of clean out your nest boxes almost, into February or March.
How do you suggest we attract them to our birdhouse?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is all about location. So for them to kind of, they'll choose nest boxes more out in the open more frequently than other cavity nesting birds,
is
like
out in the
particularly the ones, you don't want. But as far as like the tricks to getting them to come to your nest box, if it's out in a field, it's in the right location, it's, pointing a direction they like. I don't know the secrets. I would get in contact with someone from the Missouri Bluebird Society because they know a lot more specifics about bluebirds than I do. And if you love bluebirds, that's just a great group to get involved with anyway. They have a lot of cool people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Let's see.
Don't see
I know
any.
Louise's questions got her wrapped up into leading a field trip, but I don't think that'll happen to everybody.
It's not the first time Louise has led a field trip to go look at the rookery, so.
Oh, okay.
Well, if nobody has any questions, thank you again, Paige, for coming to talk to us. And just last year you talked to us on grassland birds, so.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes,
So
I remember that.
this one was entertaining as well. So that bowerbird nest, though, they built some crazy nests. So I never saw one that was all.
I'm impressed. Yeah, it was very nice.
Okay, well, next month we have Randall and Denise Clark, and they're going to share some photographs for I think it's showing
I also
photographs
like
of
the
various.
humor you put into your
various
talk.
I'm sorry.
I like the humor she puts into her talk. Very lively and interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I can't help it.
Denise and Randall are going to show slides of various photos throughout the year, various seasons, and that'll be another Zoom meeting. And so the link will be in the chat. And then also the link to this talk will also be in the chat. So Paige, I can send you the link if you want to put it on your MRBO page. Once
Yeah, that would be
once I
excellent.
create it. Okay, I'll do that too. So if there aren't any other questions or comments, thank you, Paige.
Thank you all. It was great to be here with you tonight and nerd out about bird nests. So I'll probably see you in the future at, who knows, maybe we'll just run into each other at Eagle Bluffs. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.